What's up, peeps? I don't know if I'm live yet, so bear with me. Been a little bit since I've done this. I don't think I'm live yet. Let's see. Live? I switched it up on my Facebook. Oh, I'm live. I've probably been live this whole time. Love it. All right. Rock and roll. Yep, I have been live this whole time. Like keeping it real. All right. Hey all, anybody that jumps on or watches this later. Sam and I were gonna do a live together. First, we're gonna do it yesterday, then we're gonna do it today. And because we are two divine beings that just live in flow state, anytime we plan something, it just doesn't usually happen the way that we plan it. So we've just learned to flow with that. So I'm here by myself. I know my counterpart might be watching me from her bed right now. She's a little under the weather. So this is why I'm here solo. Um, but just feeling kind of called to jump on and talk about a few things that I've recently been navigating. And I know that a lot of other people that I am friends with, work with, talk to, connected with, have been going through a lot of the same sort of situations and feelings because we are the human collective going through a massive human evolution. So it is to be expected that we are all kind of navigating a lot of similar things. And that is really why Sam and I make these videos. I can speak for myself, but I also know why she makes these videos. I make them for a couple reasons. I used to hate being seen. I used to hate being recorded. I used to hate all that. So this was like a way that I could kind of get out of my comfort zone. So I started doing YouTube videos a few years ago. Sam really led the charge on all of that. And so yeah, here I am showing up as my authentic self. Wouldn't have it any other way. And so yeah, I do these videos. Really, it helps me express, release, it's helping to heal my throat chakra. It's helping me to step into my authenticity and not care how I'm being perceived or received. So it's very healing for me to do these things. And I also do it to share with people, because like I said, I know we're all going through a lot of the same things. And so it does help when we can all kind of interrelate with one another and just not feel so alone, even though a lot of this journey feels very lonely. So tonight I am kind of going to talk about victim mindsets, which will also talk about trauma bonds, codependency, all the lovely stuff that I've been navigating, and majority of us humans are either unconsciously in or semi-aware we're in it. If you've listened to any of our other stuff, you've heard me say that codependency is something that we as humans have really been programmed from the start. It's an energy that we've all been programmed from the start to kind of live in. The system has made us very codependent. The system creates our problems and then gives us the solution. And that's really what codependency is. We have to depend on the system, essentially give our power away to something outside of us. And so codependent relationships can show up anywhere. It doesn't mean it has to be a spouse or a significant other. It can be in any relationship you have with anything. Sam and I have talked a little bit before in our podcast about, attachments and vices, addictions. That's all a form of codependency. So if you think you're not in something codependent, I'd encourage you to look at that, because we all are. And the more you become aware of it, the more you'll see it. And the more you see it, the more honest you are with yourself about it, the more healing that can come from it. If we deny that we're in these things or try to just like shove it under the rug, that is when it becomes a big problem. So, hi, Tanya from Australia. Love it. Look at this. I am global. Pretty cool. So feel free, anyone, please comments, questions. I kind of want to do this as sort of like a live coaching session. Sam and I are both coaches. So this is a lot of the stuff I talk about with my clients and myself every day. So I'd like to sort of treat this as a coaching session for anybody that wants to interact. That would be awesome. So I want to talk a little bit about victim mindsets that we all live in. Again, something programmed into all of us and something very real because we are all victims of something in this life. If we are walking around in a human skin suit, we are a victim in this game. So on the other side of that, we're also perpetrators. We're also the villains in someone's story, right? We've played both roles. That is the earth game we jumped into of duality. So we have chosen to play both roles. And a lot of what I do in my own personal shadow work is deep dive and reflect on all of my relationships that I've had throughout my 39, almost 40 years, if you believe in the illusion of space and time. But in this avatar, they tell me I've been here almost 40 years on March 8th. And so for the last, we'll say 7 or 8 years, I've been deep diving into all of my stuff. And it's been a lot, but it's also been extremely empowering. And so this victim mindset that we all live in, that the ego has done a very good job at not only creating, but solidifying for us all the time, right? When we feel like we're a victim, we feel like we're a victim. And so we will continuously tell us ourselves the same story and act out the same stories with different people or the same people. It's just human nature. It's not a judgment, it's an observation of what we do as humans and an observation of myself. Um, so when I first really started, like, you know, looking at this victim that lived in me, it was my inner child, right? It's the inner child in the majority of us because we all have been through some shit. And even if you can sit there and say that you had the most loving childhood, because I did have I can sit here and say I had a very loving childhood, but I would also be lying if I said there wasn't also a lot of shadow in that. And we all have trauma. We all have stories upon stories. We have ancestral trauma that's been passed down. We have our own. And the more we can be honest with ourselves about that, it's kind of step one. Denying that we have this trauma is not going to get you too far in your shadow work because you're literally lying to yourself. And little clue, that is your shadow actually coming in and creating that block for you because it doesn't want to be revealed, the shadow side of us. And really, it's a beautiful thing when it is. The shadow is not ugly. The shadow holds so much truth and depth and information and all of our spiritual gifts. So don't be afraid of your shadow. Invite it in. So when I first started doing this work and, you know, reflecting on my life and doing my spiritual work and connecting with my higher self and source, universal energy, whatever, it is in your life. I was shown like a lot of past lifetimes, right? Where I was playing out different roles. And the energetics of these things that I was being shown was very parallel to things that were going on in my current life. And so it was an easy way for me to kind of relate what was coming up currently and seeing the energies of these past lives, right? Okay, so I did that for like, a couple of years, dove into the past life stuff. Then I started diving into this life because this is the one I'm kind of most concerned with now. at least in this reality. Could be having this conversation with you guys somewhere else and saying the same thing. But this Maria Gingras is concerned about this life. And so it was like, okay, I've been able to see from past lives what has potentially been carried over karmically. You'll see me do this a lot, and there's a reason for that. Because I'm very careful with, there's so many labels, and people like grab onto those. And when I'm referring to a lot of these things, I'm not actually even speaking from the labels that most people are like familiar with. So karma is a whole nother story we can talk about. I've talked about it before, but that's why I do that. So anywho, I studied my past lives. And then I was like, all right, I gotta study this one. So I started, going to my childhood. Where was I a victim in my childhood, right? And so I did a lot of meditations, and my spiritual awakening was very abrupt and very fast. And that was on me, because it was like once I sort of started waking up to the external matrix and the illusions and the lies and the deceit, I was simultaneously waking up to my own shadow. So it was kind of, it was abrupt, but I wouldn't have had it any other way. It's kind of how I roll through life. Um, so I was starting to be shown, just things from my childhood that were very kind of uncomfortable to sit with. And, you know, that's what you got to do. And there's really no escaping it. I mean, you can try. I tried a little bit, but not really. Because again, I was like, once I was in this, I was in it. I was like, in it to win it. I don't know what I was winning. Myself, actually. I'm winning myself back. It's literally what I'm winning. And that actually feels like a win. So anywho, uh, yeah, people are like messaging me, so it like throws me off track. But yeah, so study the past lives. Now I'm in this life. Going back to my childhood, seeing all the stuff that my shadow self, my ego suppressed and hid away from me because it was painful and uncomfortable at the time. And I just started really doing a lot of healing work around that. So, first step to stepping out of victim mindset is first recognizing all of the areas you were a victim, right? Like you literally have to bring compassion to that part of yourself, that inner child, that inner teenager, that inner 20, 30, 40-year-old, 50-year-old, right? Up until right now. Like the wounded part of you that was hurt yesterday, right? Like you literally have to acknowledge, shit, I was a victim in this situation, right? And then sit with that and feel it. That is literally the first steps of all of this. Like you have to be like, yeah, I didn't deserve that, or whatever it is that your victim self, the story it needs to express, let it speak, right? Like I have my clients do coaching. My coaching clients do journaling to get a lot of this stuff out in between our sessions. And I give them the option of like writing journaling or voice recording, which I'm a huge proponent of the voice recording because it's something my higher self has had me do over the years. I'm someone who's had a very suppressed throat chakra. Most people that meet me now are like, what? Because here I am, right? But like legit, no, it was never like this. I didn't even like listening, like leaving voicemails on people's like answering machines and answering machine. I kind of just aged myself, but yeah, and like hearing it back. So a suppressed voice does very well with like recording yourself. Like it's like live journaling, right? And I've used it in multiple different facets. I've done it where I'm like in a complete emotional breakdown, and it would normally be a time I would maybe reach out to someone for comfort. And instead of doing that, because I was always someone that was codependent on people for that like emotional support, um, and just like having that physical safe space. And so I've learned over these last, again, 7 or 8 years how to show up for myself in that way, because that is that inner child that needs my adult self to show up for her, right? And so it's like, well, what is one of my biggest victim stories? Nobody understands me, nobody hears me, right? Nobody gets me. I know it's a lot of our stories. And so my higher self's like, it's not about others getting you. Do you get you? And I'm like, sometimes no. Um, but then I understood what my wiser self outside of this avatar was telling me. And so, hey y'all. Hi, Joe, Cheryl, Colleen. I love you guys. I love you all. Thanks for the support. Is my Massachusetts accent coming in. Joe, you'll appreciate that. Um, so yeah, the live journaling is so powerful. And I mean, I say call it journaling because that's like what I have my clients do, but for me, it was just a safe space for me to express myself. And then what I would do is go back after I was out of that emotional state and listen to it. Because what do we all want? We all want to be heard. We want someone to listen to us. But I do then observe that that's what we all want, but then most of us aren't really good listeners, right? So, like, we all want that, but then we're not even providing that space for other people. So, that is a way that I've really been able to use my throat, but listen to myself and then provide that compassion for myself, right? That's literally me showing up for the wounded part of me that was angry or sad or whatever, betrayed, whatever, you know. Um, so that is the beauty of voice recording. Other times I've used it, um, is just like when, something profound comes in and I'm like, I'm gonna forget this, right? Use it for that. And I've also used it in conversations with other people with their consent. I have not done it without people's consent, but mostly in like a time of conflict. But I've gotten this consent prior to conflict, right? It's like in relationships where there's a known disconnect in being able to communicate effectively, right? And so talking to these people when you're in a grounded state, you're both in a grounded state, and saying, like, hey, next time we're like starting to get into an argument, can I record it? Because like I want to learn how I am reacting in times of conflict. I have a kind of good idea, but trust me, like when you record yourself and go back, it's very eye-opening. It's very enlightening. Because we think we know, but when we're in the moment, and especially if we're in an emotional state, we're not thinking clearly and we don't remember. So, that has also been very beneficial for me. I wouldn't say that it has maybe been beneficial for the other people that I've been in conflict with, but for me, it has been because I've gone back and I've listened. And it's like, it's not about shaming myself or the other person. It's literally, I use it like I'm studying our human behavior. And it helps me then start to come out of the victim mindset because I'm literally observing this as two human avatars caught in their ego, caught in their shadow self, right? It's not who either of these people are at their core, but it's their behaviors. And so it has helped me study like the energetics of all of it and like, what is happening in conflict? What is happening in all of these situations? What is happening in a trauma bond? What is happening in codependency? Like I know, but I need to know for me how I am co-creating this. And this question, my higher self started giving to me really just in the last year. That really shifted like how I studied myself, observed myself, and my patterns and other people's patterns. And it was this. My higher self asked me to ask myself, what wound within me is calling this energetic experience into my life? So that is me taking accountability for whatever energy that's in my body, that whether I'm consciously aware of it or not, like it's somewhere floating around in here. That's literally me taking accountability for that, but not from like, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? Right? Because that's what a lot of us go to when we start doing this work is the ego immediately puts judgment around it and is like, all right, what am I doing wrong? I don't deserve this. And then it becomes this like now you're amplifying your victim and now you're literally just throwing all blame on the other person. And I can promise you that is going to solve nothing. Nothing. It'll keep your ego validated that it's a victim and it doesn't deserve this. And it's going to shoot all of this, I call it like shade energy at the other person, where you're literally just projecting. You're projecting whatever the emotion is, but at the root of it is all fear, right? So let me tell you, that's not going to help you break out of the pattern. Now, also understand when you're asking yourself this question, what wound in me attracted this experience or called this experience into my life, right? When you're doing that, um, it's another way of basically using the other person as your mirror, which anybody that's listened to my stuff before knows I talk about that all the time. Because that's how I've navigated this awakening is like I just use the external world as my mirror. Everything's my mirror. Everything's my mirror. What's it teaching me? What's it teaching me? What's it reflecting back? What is it showing me? And so I've like used that a lot in my coaching and everything I talk about. And I notice there's depending on where people are at in their self-awareness, um, there's almost like a glaze kind of that comes over them that's like because they're so deep in the victim mind that like they can't see that it's being co-created, right? Because a victim believes everything's happening to them. When you can step out of that and again see just the energetics of what's happening, you realize, and I use this quote all the time, and it triggers the F out of a lot of people that are in a victim mindset. And I say, we only attract into our life what we're a vibrational match for. Okay. And like it's true. This is an entire game of energy. Everything is energy. And so if something is happening in your external world, in your experience, like something within your vessel has attracted that in. And now people will try to argue me, but I don't argue with people. But people will try to argue with me like tooth and nail on this. That and this is what everybody's go-to is, right? Everybody will say, well, what about kids? And what about, they'll pick the most vulnerable or innocent, or what is perceived to be the most vulnerable or innocent being and say, well, what happened? What were they doing that called that into their experience? And it's always kids, right? It's usually kids or animals or elderly. Um, but a lot of times I get the kid thing or baby. Like what baby called in or what child called this abuse in? And so I'm always very careful how I answer that. But I'll tell you this. Anybody that doesn't already know my story, I am one of those babies. Okay? I was born in Colombia in South America. Came here, I was about 14 months old. In the time that I was there, under the care of the system, I was heavily abused by, whatever you want to call it, but the beings that want to keep a lot of this earth game in a lower vibration, a lower dimension, right? So there was some pretty like vile things that were done to me. I had two near death experiences at that time. Um, and then I was adopted and I came here to a beautiful family. Now, did did that baby did that baby deserve what happened? No. I mean, deserve in the way that like we as humans say, even use that word. That's not a word I use because the only time I use that word, I take that back. The only time I use that word is when I say that every single one of us is deserving of love because we're all love at our core. That was the only time I ever used that word. But for lack of better terms, in the way that we as humans speak, did that baby deserve what happened to it? No. But in all of this deep soul work I've done for myself, and I've connected with my soul, and Sam, my beautiful business partner, took me on a regression hypnotherapy journey, and it was just about a year ago, to 2 weeks ago or a week ago. The 7th was, I think, yeah, it was a year from when we did that like 3 hour regression where I was brought back to that time period and brought back to everything that happened to me because I knew I had to do that, right? Like I was at a point in my journey now where I've done enough of the past life. I've done enough of this life of things that I had to swallow and sit with that I was a victim in. And then I had to swallow and sit with all the times I was the perpetrator, right? And so last year it was this intuitive, all right, Sam, it's time. You need to take me back to that time in my life. And I need to see everything that happened to me because I will never be able to release the patterns that were born from those original wounds if I don't know what happened. And so we did that. And I just want to make sure I'm paying attention to people that are commenting because I'm not great at that because I don't do this all the time. I love you, Joe. Go to bed. I know you're on the East Coast. Love you. Tanya, I found for me it was focusing on all right, so Tanya says, I found for me it was focusing on surrendering to self and others and to focus on self-love and self-worth. Diving deep into shadow work can be a very lonely and difficult road, especially if you have deep traumas. Boom shakalaka, sister. Exactly. That is exactly what I'm talking about right now. Dove into my darkest traumas last year, right before my marriage ended a month later. So again, my higher self does not sign me up for the easiest of paths, but that's because my higher self knows I'm a badass. And now my human self is starting to realize that I'm a badass, right? We're all badasses. But now my human self is starting to see that, and not just see it, she feels it. That's the difference. I saw it. I've been seeing it these last years that I've been working on myself. But now I freaking feel it. Like now it is Phoenix rising. I feel how empowered and strong I am because I do not shy away from the darkness, the shadow, mine and the external world. And what I've learned in that is that in partnership, and when I say partnership, I'm more talking about terms of romantic partnerships. That has not, well, I'm not going to say it hasn't served me well. It served me beautifully. It served me right exactly where it needed to serve me to, but it has triggered people I've been with. And I say people because I'm not here to lie about anything in my life. I'm very open, transparent, honest. I'm an open book. I'm real. And so, anybody who doesn't know my full story, here's the Cliff Notes. I was with my ex-husband for 19 years, so essentially half my life. We broke up last March. I moved to New Mexico, and I was in very, very, very acute PTSD from what I left. And also someone who's one of my biggest fears my whole life is being alone. And so I came here to New Mexico, and it wasn't too long before I got myself into another trauma bond. Oh, shocker. And the wild thing is I knew it at the time, but intuitively I also knew I needed to explore it because there were a lot of residual things that like needed to be surfaced for me from my previous relationship that I feel like if I wasn't in another romantic partnership, like those wounds wouldn't have been so triggered and ripped up for me. And so even though I knew almost from the start that this was a trauma bond, I was still in very acute trauma. And so I dove in 3 different times. Third time's a charm. And I don't, first of all, I need to say I have no regrets for either relationship I was in. I genuinely love those people, like genuinely. I love them more now than I ever did when I was with them because when I was with them, I was super attached to them. And I can tell you that attachment is not love. Attachment is what keeps us in codependent trauma bonds. Again, no matter what the bond is, it could be a parent, it could be a child, it could be a friend, it could be someone in your work life. It does not have to just be a romantic partner. It can be with our vices, right? So I have no regrets from these experiences. They were the most potent and powerful catalysts and tools in my journey thus far. Because ironically, they led me back to myself, literally. And so for that, I'm grateful. I truly am grateful. And that to me is the alchemy of it, right? That's being able to first look and see where I was being victimized in these situations. You have to, again, like I started this whole thing, you have to first see that. You have to see where you're being mistreated and disrespected to then say, why in the F am I allowing this? Why am I in this right now? Especially for someone, and this is more like my more recent in the last, few months in this last year that I've been exploring these things. And I kept saying, why am I doing this? But when I was asking the question, it was coming from a place of shame, right? Because I was still in that energy of feeling victimized from what I just came from too. And so I wasn't getting my answer per se, but I was still navigating the relationship because there was also a lot of love there too. And there was a lot of different things in that relationship um that I received that I wasn't receiving from the previous one. And so again, I can see where and now why like all those wounded parts of me were drawn into that. And just because you're in trauma bonds with people too, also understand that like none of this is black and white. And like just because you might be in those doesn't mean there's not also loving energy there. But it's so buried underneath all of both of our attachments and traumas that we're not operating from the love. And so I realized that in order to operate from love, I had to walk away from both of these relationships. And holy F, that is the hardest thing, hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Because if you remember, I said one of my deepest child wounds or fears, I should say, is the fear of being alone, which comes from, the abandonment that literally every single one of us carries. And I have to say, the abandonment energy is what super like keeps these like trauma bonds going big time. And so just checking the comments again. Um, yeah. Second here. What'd Tanya say? As they say, we choose our birthday, our parents, and our journey through lifetimes. I wonder, WTF, did I choose this all for? But that being said, we wouldn't be the beautiful, strong, resilient souls we are today. 100%. And like, we can, as adults, get caught up in that victim story and keep saying, this happened to me. This happened to me when I was a baby. This happened to me when I was a child, right? We can keep telling that story. Or we can start showing compassion to that inner child that didn't have a say in what was happening to them. But then say now, as an adult, what patterns were born from that? And where am I still operating from those patterns now? That is taking accountability. People get very confused with what it means to take accountability because there's a fine line when you start to take accountability that you don't fall into shaming yourself, right? Accountability is not about shaming anyone. It's literally about owning your part in the co-creation of whatever was co-created. It's literally saying, okay, everything's energy. So I must have an energy that was a vibrational match for this, right? Or you can sit there and live in a victim mindset and say that Innocent babies that are abused didn't deserve it. And so, boom, right? Again, you're blocking. You're blocking your shadow. You're blocking your ability to grow if you cannot own your part in this game of energy. And it's not owning it from shame. It's quite the opposite. You actually feel super freaking empowered. And like, there's no room for shame when you feel that empowered. There's literally no room for that shame. It might try to creep in, but it gets kicked right out again because you're in this state of empowerment. It is like, okay, I'm not to blame. They're not to blame. All right. So if nobody's to blame in this game, then what's the energy that is driving the behavior? Where'd that come from? And how can I maybe not do that anymore? So I can maybe stop creating these same toxic bonds with people. And for me, I have had to sit with um what happened to me when I was a baby many times to really feel and really understand these deep programs in me that I'm coming from. And why am I drawn to certain energies? And what I can tell you is I'm very drawn subconsciously, which is wild, to the energy of anger in others. And then I get myself into these situations and then I go, what the F? I can't fix this anger. Right? But that is the wounded part of me that is still seeking fixing others. That's the wounded healer that many of us are, or carry that blueprint, carry that program. I don't say blueprint. We carry that program, right? We're either the wounded healer, or we're the wounded protector, or we're the wounded fixer, which essentially means we use everybody in our external environment to distract us from ourselves. And so we're uber focused on helping them, fixing them, saving them, protecting them. Again, this is literally how codependent trauma bonds are formed and how they thrive. Because you've got two individuals that are operating from very wounded energies. Do you understand? I say wounded energies and not even toxic. That word might fly out of my mouth every once in a while, but I don't even like that word because I think it's a judgment. And when you're observing energy, you're not judging energy. You're observing energy. You're not judging it. There's no like label to it, okay? It's just this is that. Yep, yep, yep. And so I personally like to use the word wounded because that also helps take me out of a victim mindset. Because again, understand that all these words have power and the way that they've been used in our human, especially English language, um, there's a lot of power there. And so when you're pointing a finger at someone and saying that they're being toxic, well, again, now you are amplifying the victim within you. You're validating the victim within you, and you're shaming that person who is also just as much is in just as much wounded energy as you are. So now you're shaming them. And so guess what? That keeps the energy of shame alive. That keeps the energy of blame alive. And that really does not help any of us take accountability for our part in the co-creation of the earth plane, right? I love you too, Derek. Yes, I am. Yes, I am getting so stronger. Derek's been one of the individuals that has gotten to see me evolve in the last year or so. And yeah. And yeah, I've had to go through everything we all have to go through everything we have to go through. Okay? And that's another thing a lot of us shame ourselves for. I could sit here and shame myself again for getting into the more recent relationship, or I can say, you know what, Maria? When you came here, you literally left your husband, your best friend in another state. You left everything you know, came to a place that you're called to come to, that you know you have soul family at, but yet you don't know anybody there yet. And you are scared AF to be alone. So you're okay. It's okay that that happened. And it also doesn't negate or change the genuine love I feel for these individuals. It doesn't. Like just because it was a trauma bond does not mean, again, there wasn't love there, and there still is massive love there. Again, there's more love there coming from my end anyways. Not so much from the other ends, and I get that because right now I'm the villain in their stories. And that's something that I have had to sit with and accept and let go, because I could then become a victim again if I allow myself to believe their beliefs of it, right? I'm not gaslighting their experience or their feelings by any means, but the deeper and higher part of me knows that what I did by leaving these situations was not me being a villain. It was me being the stronger one out of the codependent bond and saying, hey, I actually think I love myself enough now, and I sure the F love you enough to know this is not it's not gonna go well if we continue this way. So I gotta go do me, and you gotta go do you. And I release you with the highest love. Really. I mean, that is how I genuinely tried to have both of my breakups be. I'm at a point in my growth that I can sit and have a very honest, open conversation and take accountability for my role in things, right? But I'm not going to sit and like argue with people. I don't have the energy or the space for that. And I'm not going to get yelled at. Like, that is a firm boundary I now have. Because, like I was saying before, there's this subconscious thing in me, this program in me that gets drawn to anger, that then I'm like, wait, I can't fix this anger, and now all this anger is being projected at me, and now what do I do? And so I go, oh my God, what wound in me is calling this in? And so again, I take accountability for my energy and my behaviors. And because I'm very aware that while I'm waking up, I don't consider myself to be like awake. I consider myself to be someone who's waking up and remembering my truth and remembering who I am, because there is years and lifetimes worth of programs and traumas that are like piled on top of all of that truth of who we all are, right? And so I'm digging my way through all these layers. And so it is a process, and I believe it is a lifelong journey. I know from my own experience with it, it gets easier in the sense that it gets easier because I know who I am. You start to know who you are more and more. And so navigating these experiences just becomes easier, meaning because you're more self-aware, you're using these experiences as tools for growth and for human connection. Amazing. All the things our soul came to do in this game that we lose sight of when we're here. Because why? We're in a victim mindset with everything that's happening to us, around us, to people that we love. And so we get sucked into all of that. And we miss the whole journey. We miss the point of life, and that it is meant to be a journey, and that every experience is just that. It's an experience. And we can either grow from those experiences, or we can not grow from them. It's like really kind of that simple. I just want to see if anybody has. Hi, Sam. Watching me from bed. Yeah, Sam, if you're still watching me, if you want to throw any enlightening comments in the chat, feel free. Because yeah, These are just the things that have been ruminating for me, because I've been navigating them very recently. But also, seems to be everybody I talk to and work with is navigating very similar things. So that tells me we, the human collective, are evolving, which is cool. And we're all navigating a lot of similar shit. Beautiful stuff, beautiful shit. It's beautiful shit. It is beautiful shit. Yeah, so I'm just trying to think if there's really anything else, but to me, so let me just break it down. One last little cliff note time here, because I tend to go on like the river. But this whole thing was about breaking free from victim mindset. So, step one is recognizing first and being honest with yourself about where you have felt like the victim and sit with yourself. However long you have to sit with yourself. When people ask me, they're like, what do you mean like you do the work? Like what does that even mean? It's like, well, this is the work. And when I say I sit with these things, I mean I sit with these things in a oftentimes a dark room with literally no mute, like nothing. Because for me, I've just learned that the less distraction I have in my external environment, the more I can deep dive into me. And the more I can get really uncomfortable. But when I allow myself to get that uncomfortable and sit in it, what I come out the other side feeling is like, holy shit. Because I've just released like years and lifetimes worth of stuck energy, right? And our bodies, this is the other thing I will just kind of briefly touch on because it's something that happened to me and also just a very real thing that happens to all of us. And Sam and I have talked about it before when we talk about grief. But grief, and this is why I'm a grief recovery coach, because I know how this energy takes up a lot of space in our body. Because all of the energy work that I do on people, there is a shit ton of grief in our bodies that we have not allowed ourselves to feel and face. And what I can tell you what happens with that is on the anniversaries of things, whether it's the death of a loved one or the ending of a relationship or some life altering event, right? Because grief is not just about people that die. I've said this a gajillion times, but I never know who's listening, who's new. So it bears repeating. Like grief. Hang on, let me get my, because I love this definition. And I'm not a huge person that loves definitions anymore because I feel like they're limiting, but I actually feel like this definition, it just super resonates with me. And I don't want to F it up if I don't read it verbatim. But it just helps. It just helps us all understand what grief actually is. So this is from the Grief Recovery Handbook that I did my certification through the Grief Recovery Institute. And yeah, I just love them. So let me, of course, find here it is. All right. So, definition of grief that very much resonated with me when I first started. Grief is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of or change in a familiar pattern of behavior. So, as you can see, that is more than just someone dying. So, anytime we go through something altering in our life, the energy of grief comes up, and guess what? None of us feel it. None of us even recognize it. So, like, guess what? Then the body holds on to it. So, on the anniversary of big things, the body remembers, and the human will react from these memories, will project from these memories, even though there is a super giant unconscious part of them that doesn't even make the correlation. And so this is why feeling your grief is so important. It's so uncomfortable, but I cannot tell you like how crucial it is to living a full life. Honestly. You gotta like face it. And what I can tell you, it comes on the other side of grief to me. So like grief, it's a coin, right? Everything's a coin because we live in duality here. I was like looking for a coin, but on the other side of grief is gratitude. And gratitude is the alchemist of grief. Truly. Every time I grieve someone or something more and more, because today was a day. Today I had a day. And I grieved a lot once again today. Um, a lot of the same things, right? As my human self would say, but a lot of different, but it's not the same because every time I grieve it, it's a different layer of it, or it's different. So it's not the same. And if it were the same, it wouldn't be coming up again because if I've already released it, then it wouldn't be coming up. So it's never actually the same thing. But we, the human, are like, oh my God, I thought I healed this. I thought I let this go. Right? That little judgy part. And it's like, yo, again, it's an onion. There's layers. And the onion will make you cry. The onion will make you cry. But it's a beautiful thing because on the other side of that crying is gratitude. And I cannot tell you the immense amount of gratitude um, that I feel every time I come through that for myself, for the situation, for the individual, for whatever, right? Like it's like for anything. It's like every time is like a new spiritual awakening, if that makes sense. For people that have been through really like potent awakenings of like, oh my God, I just love life again. I see life through a different lens. And that's literally how I feel every time I come out of these like very low, deep, dark places. So feel your grief, people, because for all you know, something that you lost 20 years ago could still be eating at you today, and you might be projecting that in the world to the world around you in ways that are not great, that are hurtful to others, right? Because we're hurting. And like that saying goes, hurt people we do, but healed people also will heal people in the sense that everything is energy and everything's contagious. That's really what that statement is saying. Like everything is energy, everything's contagious. If we are in a massive state of suffering and hurt and very unconscious about it, we are going to project that in all sorts of behaviors to the world around us, right? If we are actively working to become more self-aware and love ourselves more, because that is quite literally what this entire journey is about self-love. And can you love all of these shadow parts of yourself? Because once you do, that's when the forgiveness comes in, and that's when there's no more shame, and then that's when the gratitude happens. It's almost like such a predictable process the more you do it because it's like, oh no, now I'm in the stage of my gratitude. Now I'm in the stage of this, right? And I'm just going to flow through all of it because that's what I do. I just flow with everything that comes up now. I'm not going to suppress things anymore. I'm not going to try to tell myself I'm not feeling this right now. I'm not going to say this isn't really happening because I see what happens when we live in states of delusion and illusion. And let me tell you, my friends, it is not a pretty thing that happens to us as humans when we lie to ourselves, because when we lie to ourselves, guess what? There's no possible way to be honest with other people. How can you be honest with other people if you're always lying to yourself, right? So there's that accountability thing again. Taking accountability is like literally one of the most loving things you can do for yourself and other people. And again, accountability is not about shaming yourself. It's about saying, okay, we're all energy beings here. I can say that. I'm pretty aware that I got a lot of energies floating around in me that I'm not aware of. And so doesn't this individual. So, given the fact that I'm trying to study myself and my human behavior, what energy is coming up for me right now? What is co-creating this scenario right now? How do I call this shit show into my life right now? Right? And, one last thing I'll kind of say before I end. Um, Because sometimes these situations can seemingly come out of nowhere. Like, you're just doing your thing, you're in a peaceful state, you're not like fucking with anybody, you're just doing your thing, and all of a sudden the attack comes. And you're like, what? What? What is happening right now? Why is this happening right now? Why is this happening to me right now? Right? The victim. And so honor the victim, let it be a victim for however long it needs to throw its temper tantrum to itself or in a safe space, right? Like, because I navigated this a little bit today. Um, but I also have a very deep understanding and understanding of where this other individual is at. And so the empath in me can always see the wounded in the other person and have all this compassion. But then the wounded empath in me for a long time, because I could see that, tolerated a shit ton. Understand that. I tolerated a shit ton. But I also understand that because of the way I came into this game, I would tolerate a shit ton because I went through a shit ton when I first got here, right? Remember, abused in the most gruesome ways that the entities that do that do that. So like the darkest paradigms that we're all having a hard time waking up to, like that was done to me, okay? Um, but I use that as a catalyst for my growth now because I now understand because that was so traumatic that that left like deep wounds. And so how would my adult self not be operating from those, right? Like obviously she is. And so I have to hug that baby and hug this adult human and say you're doing the best you can and just keep learning and just keep growing and just keep using every experience as just that, an experience. And you will always end up finding the blessings in it. Maybe not right away, maybe not when it's happening, even though you can still hold compassion when you're in those situations. You're still allowed to feel like a victim. So again, you got to honor the victim. You got to let it feel its victimness because yeah, a lot of unfair, unjust stuff happens in this world and to us and from us, right? So like my situation today, it was okay. This seemingly came out of nowhere, but I get it. But okay. So now, how do I handle this in the most loving way? And like the grounded rock star that I am, I didn't react because I'm not a reactionary person. I've never been a reactionary person. Meaning like people can come at me and say like the most vile things and do vile things, and like I will like almost not react at all. Now I will say a lot of that in the past was wounding. It was I just didn't like conflict. I didn't want to further anger the situation, and I'm the one there apologizing, right? Like that like typical trauma response. I'm not that way anymore. Now I have firm boundaries, and I no longer will tolerate like a disrespect. But I'm also not gonna play. I'm not gonna play in the same energy because again, that's gonna keep it going. So I'm going to allow another individual to say whatever they need to say. I'm not going to dismiss it. I'm going to say my piece, and then I'm going to cut the conversation done. And then I'm going to go cry and be the victim that I need to be for maybe today it was only like maybe about an hour. And hold space for myself and cry and ruminate over the past again and say, I feel like I'm right back again. Right? And then it's like, no, okay, let it move through you, let it be. Oftentimes I'll put on music that further incites these emotions even more. Because that helps me release. It helps me move the energy. Like instead of like, a lot of people are like, oh, I can't listen to that. And I can't, it's like, oh, give me the saddest song, give me the song that's gonna remind me of them the most. Give it all to me. Cause I wanna fucking feel it. Like I don't wanna run from this anymore. And so I let my victim be her victim for about an hour, however long she needed. And then I took a shower and like cleared it all. And I always get a lot of whatever, epiphanies in the shower because water's a beautiful conductor and it's cleansing and yeah. And then in there, I cried a little more, but then I started like then the gratitude started like pushing all the other energies up. And I started laughing. And then I was like, yo, on the other side, we're all going to laugh about this someday. Right now, it's a shit show, but someday it's all going to be good on the other side. So again, let yourself be the victim, feel being what the victim feels like, feel it in all of its feels. Whatever emotion comes up from your victim self, let it tell its story to you. However long it needs to tell its story to you. Like I was saying before, there have been days over these years that I've done this shadow work where I did not come out of a room because I literally just sat by myself for hours with all of this and choosing not to numb out, choosing not to distract because I'm like, I'm only doing a disservice to myself and anybody that is connected to me. So I better like stop running from my shadow because it's always gonna be there. And if I don't allow myself to show it the compassion that it is literally screaming for, it is going to eat me alive and then it will literally destroy anyone in my path. So doing this work for yourself is literally the most loving thing we can all do for ourselves and for this earth plane. It's really quite that simple. Um, yeah. So understand that there are going to also be times where, yeah, you're just like in your flow. You're just like whistling your favorite tune, and then boom, an attack comes. And again, you're like, what? Huh? What? So then once, the victim feels its victim self, I realized that the experience that was coming into my life was an opportunity for me to really see where I'm at in my growth. And am I going to handle this situation any differently than I have previously? Or am I pretty solid in how I'm handling these situations? So it was not that I did anything wrong. I didn't deserve it, right? Like how humans would say. But energetically, it was an experience that needed to come in for me, A, to see where my growth is, B, because it also helped me release more grief that needed to come up. And so then that's where the gratitude came for after. Like once I realized, I was like, oh, this was that I mean that individual's just in their state, like duh, that hasn't changed. But it's like, but yet I am in a different state. I do not have to allow this to bring me to where it used to. So there's me recognizing my growth, but also it did trigger wounded parts of me. So I'm going to allow those feelings to come up and feel that and then grieve for an hour and then go, oh, so this was all about like another layer of grief that I had to feel about this situation. And also, it amplified more self-worth in me, which is what this whole thing has been about for me. It's all been about returning to my worthiness and my love for myself because I so easily pour it out to everyone else, but my whole life. But I also know that a lot of that love I poured out was inauthentic, meaning it was coming from a wounded place that just wanted to be loved from other people and accepted. Now, by filling my vessel first with all of that beautiful, delicious love, then whatever pours out to people around me just pours out. It's not like I have to try or force anything. I don't feel siphoned. And I can tell you, if you're in any situation, whatever the relationship is, and you're literally feeling like your energy is being siphoned, you might want to look at that because it's probably not the most loving situation for either of you to be in. if there's any siphoning of either people's energies, and again, that is what's happening in codependency, you're both siphoning each other's energy because you are codependent. You are dependent on the other person for something or some things, it's usually multiple things. So that is where energy siphon happens. We allow it to happen. Again, mostly unconsciously, subconsciously. For me, this last go around in my last relationship was definitely a knowing of the energy being siphoned, but I had to do it to get to a point where I know I'll never do that again. I'll never tolerate that again, and I will never do that again. And so it's kind of like any addiction or any attachment that we have. It's like you have to almost use it to the point where there's this internal shift within you. And sometimes it's physical disease that happens, that it's like, shit, can't do that anymore, right? But some of us have just an internal like gumption that you just keep using this vice or this addiction, or you keep diving into relationship after relationship, whatever, again, whatever the attachment is, whatever the behavior is, it's still what we're doing is the same thing. We're all distracting ourselves from ourselves because it's super uncomfortable to sit with yourself for 13 hours in a dark room and feel everything from your dark past. But it's siphoning your energy. And when we are in codependent trauma bonds, we are siphoning the other person's energy and they are siphoning ours. And so if you notice that you're feeling that way in any way, shape, or form, again, whatever the relationship is, could be your job. Probably a lot of people, it's the job. Could be your partnership with your spouse, your significant other. Could be a friendship. A lot of times it's a parent and a child. A lot of that now, like, is the case too. So again, it doesn't matter, the label of the relationship, the energetic experience that's happening is still the same thing. There's a codependent bond happening, and so both individuals are siphoning each other's energy and can't. And that's where the blaming happens and the shaming and the scapegoating and the pointing of the fingers and the lack of accountability. Like it's just like this whole chain of events that happens in these types of situations. So it's very interesting, very enlightening to study as you start to study yourself and love yourself more. It really is. It's quite the journey. So I feel like that's everything I wanted to kind of just dive into. Just want to see. Well, thank you. I'm a great communicator. It's taken me a long time to get here, but thank you for seeing that and saying that. And hi, Celeste, my girl. Consent is an interesting concept. Yes, consent. I think you might have just jumped on, Celeste, so you can watch the recording of it. But I do talk a bit about consent. In oh, it was about recording. But yeah, consent, consent. I love that she brought up that word. So consent can be what I have found is consent should be a conscious thing, right? Like when we give someone's consent for something or they give us ours, it's like a conscious agreement. Um, for whatever it is, right? In relationship, you're asking for consent, like how I had used it before about if you're going to voice record like a conversation between you and another person, always ask for the consent before you do it. But what I find in like these codependent bonds, these trauma bonds that are rooted in a lot of unconsciousness, there is an energetic consent that's happening, but there isn't a conscious awareness of it, right? So it's more of just an energetic vibrational match that's happening without the conscious consent. Um, and consent, if it is something that is being done on a conscious level, you have to be a conscious individual, and so does the other person. And so chances are, if you're in a trauma bond, that there's still a lot of unconscious energy flying around between both of you. So just start choosing more conscious people. And I can tell you that that happens naturally the more you become conscious of yourself. And again, it's all vibrational matches. And so the more empowered you feel, the more love you give to yourself, the more the outside world's going to reflect that. I'm not saying there's still not going to be reflections of your shadow too, because the shadow, I don't believe ever, you know, it's our human self, right? And while we're in the human body, it's part of us. It's a beautiful part of us. It's not a bad thing. And in this ascension, essentially, we're just loving our shadow into our light that is already ascended and didn't go anywhere, right? It's the human part that's down here, descended, running around trying to ascend. And it's like, yo, we're ascended. Like our light's already ascended. It's up there. It's there. It's right here. Um, so yeah, consent, I thank you for bringing that into this conversation, Celeste, because it is a very important thing as especially as we start co-creating more conscious relationships with people and having much more effective and open and honest and therapeutic communication. Whoa, what a concept. I love it. Consent's a big part of that. And asking for people's consent. Another way I ask for consent a lot is guidance, right? Like it's different, obviously, if somebody books a session with me, they're literally buying a service to allow me to give them guidance from their higher self, right? And whatever my coach self feels is intuitively going to support them. But I'm talking more in terms of just in conversation with friends, family, whoever. Like we all, because we're in, a lot of us still have that wounded fixer, the wounded healer in us, the wounded knower it aller, know it aller. Um, that just wants to give everybody the answers to their test, even though we don't know the answers to their test. Because even if they're navigating an experience that maybe you've been through, guess what? They are a unique individual that has to go through it for themselves, right? Because I had a lot of people try to tell me how to navigate this last thing that I was in, this last relationship. Uh, and like while I appreciate where I know that's coming from, I am a conscious enough person to I knew what I was doing and I knew I had to do everything I did. And so here I am to say, like, yeah, I knew I had to do all that. But again, I was oftentimes given unconsented, or I should say, the word I use a lot is unsolicited advice. And we as humans love to run around and do that. We love giving unsolicited advice. It's just like, because what we're really doing, and actually that's another way to do shadow work. Um, Notice when you're doing that, because whatever advice you're giving to someone else is really meant for you. You're doing that because there's an aspect of you that knows that it wants to give you that advice, but it's very easy to give it to the external world because we very easily see things externally and not always internally. Um, but that's okay. We see it when we're ready, and that's what it comes down to. And then all of this whole journey then becomes like a lot more conscious choice, right? Like it just becomes conscious choice. And then with consent, right? Consent is all part of that. Katarzyna. Hi, girl. Katarzyna is one of my soul sisters, and she says, your sessions are mind-blowing. Your channel is amazing. I feel so blessed, honored, and grateful for everything I learned from our session. And yes, I believe we have our paths to grow through. I love you. She's amazing. All these people are amazing. You know why I'm attracting amazing people into my life? Because I know I'm amazing now. And so my tribe is here. And my guides told me that through multiple different vessels and channels that my soul fam was here. And that's why I came and I trusted it, even though it was scary, even though I, once again, like I said before, I left everything I knew. I dove into my scariest fear of being alone and losing my husband, because that was always like a huge fear of mine that he was going to leave or I was going to lose him. And I'm the one that left. So how ironic. Because I realized I had lost myself somewhere along the way. I'm not certain that I even knew myself when I met him. In fact, I know that now. I can sit here and say I did not know who I was when I met him, which is a perfect recipe for, yet again, a codependent trauma bond. Because if you don't know who you are going to seek all sorts of things in that individual. And they're likely doing the same thing with you. Not likely, they are, because they wouldn't be in the situationship relationship that they're in with you. Because like I said, everything's a vibrational match. So I think I have yapped for long enough. I don't even know how long I've been on here. So I think I'm going to probably wrap this up. And oh, cottage dreams. I'm glad you came here and allowed yourself to glow with us all. I am too. I am glad that I listened to my heart and soul and intuition, even though a lot of times the guidance that comes with that feels very scary to our human self, because the guidance that usually comes from our higher self is something that we've not done before, or it's encouraging us to face a fear. And so then the ego shadow self comes in and tries to tell you, well, you don't have to do that. No, no, no. Like, there's another way you can heal that. Okay. That's bypassing. And that's again, our ego is very crafty in how it will like manipulate us into not doing the work, really. So I am grateful that I have learned to really trust my heart and intuition, even when my ego is like, oh, really, I don't want to do that. Because that means I have to break out of an old pattern that has kept me very comfortable, but also in a lot of suffering. I know, but it's what I know. Like last week I had like several ego deaths in the middle of the night. I was just waking up um with a lot of just super subconscious fears that are wrapped up in the fear of being alone that I never really gave conscious thought to. For me, like my whole fear of being alone was like being without a partner for my life. Like, and I know that comes from like the like Disney demonic Disney romanticizing of like soulmate and your forever person and they complete you, and just like the whole narrative again of seeking all of this outside of us. And so I bought into that. I totally bought into that from a very young age. And you know, just that fear of being alone. And then I was in a very abusive relationship in high school. Shocker, I know. Left that one and went right into my relationship with my ex-husband. So it's like I relationship hopped 100%. I can own that. I've really only been in 3 relationships, but I went 1, 2, 3 and learned what I needed from those 3 to know I will never get myself into another codependent trauma bond again. So I love that I learned from them. They're my greatest teachers. And literally on the other side, I know our souls are literally high-fiving, like, good job. Told you I was going to play that role this time. And good freaking job. Like I see that. I know that. I connect with that. I trust that. Which probably helps me navigate some of these things with a little more compassion. And I'm grateful for that too. Because again, why? I have chosen to trust my intuition. I have chosen to trust my connection with my spirit, with source, with my heart. Because even when the guidance feels a little scary and out of my comfort zone, it has not led me astray. And so I think that's it for tonight. I think I have talked y'all off your ears off enough. But feel free to, I don't know, shoot me any messages or comments if any of this resonated. If it triggered you, feel free to reach out. I am happy to hold space and chat and whatever. Like this is not easy shit that we're going through. The world is blowing up literally in all ways, shape, and form, and it's hard to not succumb to the fear. And again, that's why for me, shadow work is so important because of everything that's happening out there. Like, I can't control all of that. And I can either succumb to the fear of the collective and everything that's happening, or I can choose to face my own fears and become the most empowered, conscious being that I can be, loving being, and know that no matter what happens, like this human existence is temporary for me, and I'm legit just gonna get the most out of it that I can. And love the most that I can while in a dimension that wants us to stay locked in fear. And so I think that's a beautiful place to stop. I love you all. Thanks for being here. Thanks for jumping into this game. It ain't easy, that's for sure. But I feel very grateful and blessed to be on this journey with all of you. So much love, peeps, and I'll see you when I see you. Have ya.